Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Double Book. I'm Irene, and this is Summer of Sarah. And this week, I'm super excited to be reading or reviewing the book What Happened to Goodbye. I think this might be the first Sarah Dessen book that I actually haven't read because I was reading it and I was like, I don't remember a single thing about this book, which is weird because I read that summer and I don't remember that one quite as clearly, but I do remember reading it like once I got into it. This one I have no recollection of. And I feel like for very specific reasons, I can't necessarily divulge without divulging incredibly personal information. Let's just say the sport basketball and I don't get along, but I'll leave it at that. However, it was very heavily involved in basketball, and please ignore this like weird in my top right, I guess if you're looking at the screen top left, this like little orb thing. I don't know. It's like the sun is coming in and then it's hitting the it, sunlight. Look, if I go back, you can like see it, and then if I go forward, I think the camera. Oh, never mind. It was kind of focusing on me. Now you can just see my fine lines in my forehead. Ooh, that's wild. Okay, don't look at that. Okay, I'm shocked. I think I do remember though that it was coming out and then I just never had gotten back to the store to get it. I'm mad that I've been missing out on it. However, I can say I love it. Of course, I love it. Why wouldn't I love it? But there's actually a book that I'm reading right now. I won't spoil it for you guys. I mean, it's a Sarah Dessen book, of course, but there is a book that I am reading of Sarah Dessen's, and I think it might be a lot worse than what I remember it being. Anyway, so it's a complex book, has confrontation, and has a slow burn that I love altogether. So let's just dive into a quick recap. Sorry about that. But I want to start out. I want to preface this by saying I'm not 120% sure how the main character's name is supposed to be pronounced. I'm gonna say Mechlin, um, because McLean sounds weird and Mechlin sounds better. So I'm just gonna that's how I'm gonna pronounce it. It's Mclean. Do with that what you will. So here's the synopsis. Mechlin has reinvented herself at least 3 times since her parents' divorce. Moving 4 times in 2 years helps, but so does slightly changing your name every time. Mechlin's mom had an affair that ended in twins and a new husband. A husband that coaches the team that Mechlin used to love. Her dad is a hot chef who brings her to rehab restaurants from city to city. What happens when they find a place that they want to have roots in? Will Mechlin let Dave, the weirdo brain kid, into her life, or will he forever not be her type? Anyway, so right off the bat, this book is juicy, you guys. Like I was salivating over it. Okay, I'm sorry I did all of those motions. Please ignore that. Right off the bat, we see Mechlin and her dad in a new restaurant that they're trying to save. They're assessing the whole menu, seeing what can potentially be kept on the menu, what should go, all of those things. We find out why her dad took this offer of moving around every few months or so from town to town to save all these rundown, last ditch efforts for these restaurants in these small towns. His wife his ex-wife, I should say, had an affair that made headline news. We find out that Mechlin's mom had an affair with the university basketball coach, which happened to be the team that both Mechlin and her dad so dearly loved. And then when the new coach came into town, who was a young guy, the mom also found basketball very interesting, to say the least. It is insane because I can't imagine, because this man loved this team. He went to college there, he played for the team, all of these things. He lived, breathed, and ate this basketball team, right? So everything that he glorified essentially came crashing down, including his wife. Wild. She got pregnant, divorced, and then remarried because everyone knew what happened. Mechlin decided it would be best to just kind of skip town and start over with her dad. I don't think I can blame her. It was incredibly public. She is a child. She might be 18 when this book takes place, but when that divorce took place, she was 16. It doesn't seem like there was a lot of support in any which way for her, which is really hard on somebody who's going through an incredibly hard life change. Um, and so, yeah, I don't blame her for skipping town. And she was thrust into the spotlight essentially without any regard for her well-being, and I think her mom was incredibly selfish for that. So we see her mom though throughout this book try over and over to get into Mechlyn's good graces, and I mean it makes sense. It is her mom, and I think that I can commend her for trying even though she did wrongdoing, because that is still her daughter. She still is trying to show that she cares about her, and she just needs to give her, I think if she gave her like a little bit of time and space to kind of move on and readjust and maybe offer some support, I think things would have been different with them. But I think the biggest flaw in this book is the fact that her mom refuses to kind of acknowledge this big flaw. Like she's like, yeah, I did it, but she's not taking it's almost like she's like, yeah, it happened, but she's not taking responsibility for her part in it. It's almost like she just wants to sweep it under the rug and move on. And she doesn't acknowledge the fact that she hurt her daughter. So I think that's also the biggest thing, is like you broke up the entire family, made it quite literal headline news, and then you can't just like pretend that it's okay after that. Like you have to mend the fence, and she like guilt trips Mechlyn in a lot of ways, and I just think it's very inappropriate. um we do find out her parents used to own a restaurant and it didn't make much money, which was a reason that her mom was frustrated. I'm sure that it was a reason that contributed to their divorce. Her dad was there at night. um, and I know that it must be tough running a business together as a couple, and then also that being your only source of income and it not doing well. However, I don't think it's an excuse to cheat. And I think that there are a lot of people who think, well, um well, such and such happened and blah blah blah, and I'm like, I don't know, I just don't ever think there's a reason. That's just my opinion. Like, just divorce the person and move on. We don't get a clear reason, but it's if you read it, it's a very heavily implied thing that the restaurant was the reason her parents divorced, besides the affair. Like, that's the reason, like the catalyst for the affair and all of that. Jacqueline moves to a new place. She reinvents herself. So her middle name is Elizabeth, and she goes by different variations of her middle name, essentially, like Lizzie, Liz, Elizabeth, or, just Beth, things like that. So she'll go off a variation of her name, and right off the bat, she loses control. She wants to create a fake identity, persona, essentially. She wants to just reinvent herself, and she doesn't want to be herself because she seems that she's just running away from her problems, which eventually they all catch up to you. But it seems like everyone finds out her real name on accident, and then her kind of real persona shows through. And I think it's the universe's way, in my opinion, of making her kind of face this problem, right? And just be like, look, you have to finally accept what happened. You have to move on, and you have to do better and just move on with your life. You can't keep letting this weigh you down, essentially. Gets acquainted with this town. She has a friend group of a few people, who includes Dave, who's actually crushing on Mechlyn pretty hard, Riley, Heather, and Deb. There is also Ellis, who is more of Dave's friend. He's a little bit odd, but, they all kind of put up with him. Not put up with him in a bad way, but they all, just hang around him because he is Dave's friend. A lot of this book is a push between Mechlyn wanting to be closer to her mom, like they were when she was young, but then that pull of remembering everything she's done. She has two new kids who are 3 years old, and she like, she kind of goes back and forth on whether or not what to kind of decide what relationship she has with her mom, because it used to be a very different relationship, and I'm sure it's not an easy thing to navigate, and especially without the proper support, especially emotional support. I think it's a really, really hard thing for her to even consider doing. And I don't think this is something that people navigate very easily, especially by themselves at 18 years old. However, I think it is a fair thing, and no one has given her the space or the grace or the tools to heal from this. And they just expect her to adapt and be okay with all of these changes that are happening to her life, to her. And I get it. There's a reason that grown-ups make decisions, but grown-ups also don't know what they're doing 90% of the time. So, anyway, I also think her mom pushes too hard and gets upset when her daughter needs space. I know that I'm not a mom, and I will say that until I am blue in the face. I am not a mom. I understand I can never feel the things that a mom feels. However, I don't think that because you're a parent, it makes you always right, and you always have to do, like, your kid always has to do everything you say. And it doesn't give you an excuse for not apologizing. I think it's stupid. actually. I think parents should apologize more because I think that, one, an apology goes an incredibly long way, but I think it's also a great way to teach your kids how to learn from their own mistakes. And it's like, do as I say, not as I do. But most people do as they see. So I think setting the example is, I don't know, my setting the example is the best way to teach kids. And also, she just, like, Mechlin at the end of the day just wants to be heard. She just wants to, like, have the acknowledgement. People want to be acknowledged, and 9 times out of 10, if you just, like, look at them and you're like, you're right, I am so sorry, or, I understand your frustrations, I'm sorry, I feel bad, whatever it might be, like, you can diffuse a situation 9 times out of 10. Very rarely, I feel like, in very heightened situations does it happen where it escalates, but especially a parent with their child, I feel like a lot could be solved with just a simple acknowledgement of feelings. She's seemingly settling into this new place well. She really likes the high school. She likes her friends. She likes the restaurant, at least the staff, just like the people that her dad's working with. Her dad is getting a lot of pushback, though, from the people within the restaurant, which is natural if someone is coming in and changing everything and you're probably afraid that you're going to lose your job. But it is a natural part of the process. There is a subplot throughout the book where Mechlin is helping Opal, the manager of the diner that her dad is trying to fix and put together a display for the town. It's like a huge table sized, like dining table sized replica of the town for its like 100th anniversary. And it has like all these model trains and cars and houses and everything down to the detail. And it sounds like a freaking nightmare, in my opinion. I like a good puzzle as much as the next person, but they have like 2 months to finish this whole thing, and I think it's absolutely wild. So naturally, all the friends end up helping out, and I think it's a really cute thing that happens because it's like a natural way to bring everybody closer together without being like, let's go hang out all the time. Like, they know at this time they're gonna have to go hang out with, not hang out, they're gonna work on this project and all of these things. So in case you couldn't tell, Dave is our main character love interest. He is great. I think he is super funny. And he actually, at the end of the book, ends up putting like all the spots he and Mechlin had, like all of these cute little moments on the display, which I think is it's just so sweet. It's so niche. It's so cute. It fits them. So she eventually blows up at her mom and is like, you need to give me space. And I think it's well deserved. And everyone's like, well, you need to be nicer to her. And eventually her mom calls like the lawyers and is like, hey, if she doesn't start doing our requested or our visitation schedule, then we're going to have an issue. And I'm just like, this is why your daughter won't speak to you. Like, this is insane. You're insane. And it's not to say that I don't think she does. She clearly cares about her daughter, right? She cares about her daughter an awful lot, and I think that that has a lot to do with it. However, I also think it's really unfair to force your new life on your daughter and then pretend like it's okay that she's hurting. And I think that's my biggest problem with her mom throughout this book. Um, Her stepdad, the coach, eventually invites her to a game that is near her town and everything, and is like, oh, she would love it if you would go. The twins will be there, blah blah blah. And Mechlin clearly doesn't want to go, and I wouldn't either, especially after all the things that have happened. You're sitting right behind them. She gets too anxious and then invites Dave, like on her way out. She's like, "Come with me," and she doesn't tell him who she is or why she's able to get him a ticket to this insane game. And it goes over okay. Her mom is happy that she was there. She presses Mechlin about Dave and, like, thinking that they're romantic and all of these things. And pulls away even more after this. And I think, and that's actually, I lied. That's actually when she hits the emergency button and calls the lawyers and everything, because it was too much for Mechlin. And I think that she needs to realize, like, this isn't like an overnight fix. And I understand it's been 2 years of like kind of back and forth with your daughter, but it wasn't like a small thing that happened. Like, her entire life changed overnight, and then now she has to just deal with it. But I think getting the courts involved is one of the shittiest things you can do. I have people in my life who have experienced these things and who have really gone through the ringer when it comes to divorces and all of that. And I think stomping your feet and pouting and trying to get your way is probably a surefire way to get your kids to like genuinely be upset with you and not really want to see you anymore. So this next paragraph, I remember heated writing it, so I just want you guys to know that I've calmed down a lot, but my feelings still remain the same, even if my tone is very different. So I said, how are you going to drag your almost 18-year-old daughter to court because you're butthurt that she won't see you due to your own shitty actions? How shitty of a parent are you? You made this girl a spectacle at 16, one of the hardest ages to deal with peer pressure, with public backlash, all of these things, made her want to run around the country with her father, changing her name, changing herself every few months, and schools, not to mention, like, just moving itself is so taxing. In her last 2 years of high school, and then you pulled a lawyer card because you aren't getting your way. Are you okay? Do you need someone to smack you? Because I'll gladly do it. And I genuinely feel this way because I think that there is something so inherently selfish when someone was like, well, I was dying inside the relationship, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, that's fair. I understand. You need to move on and figure out your own life without them. Does that mean, though, imploding the life of your entire family in that sort of way? Divorcing amicably and then being like, look, we just don't work well together anymore. And then moving on, I think would be totally freaking fair and even justified. But having a whole affair, I'm sorry, like, I just, like, and you know what? Honestly, I blame the stepdad too. Like, it's not like you didn't know that she was married. It's not like you didn't know that this shit would get out of hand so quickly. And then you have the audacity for everybody to be like, well, you need to be nicer to your mom. No, sorry. It's just not how it works. And I understand she definitely cares about her daughter. I don't think that could be any more clear. However, I think threatening her with a lawyer is just the last thing you do if you want to get on her good side. It drives me nuts that her mom decided to do this, and eventually the lawyers call it off because Mecklin comes to a deal with her. She'll spend her spring break and 4 weekends with her, and then her mom calls off the courts. Everything starts to bubble up though at this spring break trip because I think this is like the first time in a really long time where Mecklin is just like alone with her mom, and like they're, and I know the twins are there, but it's just like really just her. So, and I think and it's a scary thing because I think Mecklin has a lot of things she wants to say, but she doesn't want to say them in fears of setting everything off, and she just wants to finish her school year essentially. Um, and so then it starts to really build up, though, right before she leaves, when her dad's boss comes in and tells him that he has a restaurant in Hawaii that he wants him to take. And then her dad is like, well, I don't know if I want to do that. Because he seemingly has also been putting down roots too. He is dating people, and eventually we find out he's dating Opal, which I think is funny because I do think they had tension the entire time they were working together. But I think there's a point where you want to stop running and you just want to settle down. And I think moving is one of the hardest things you can do. It's a huge adjustment, it's a huge disruption to your life, and getting used to new streets, new people, new sounds, new sights, new smells. Like, all of it is so disruptive, and it's such a sensory overload on people that I think it's just like not what anybody else needs right now. And then nothing is officially decided. She kind of decides that she wants to go because of this kind of weird blowout fight. So every time Mecklin moved to a new town, created a new persona, she also created like a new social media page essentially for them. Um, and her friends find it and they think that she's some sort of like sociopath or something. And to be fair, I just don't feel like they understood. And so Mecklin runs away and is like, I'm good to move to Hawaii. And then I just would like to point out, though, she did kind of mention it once or twice to her friends. She's like, yeah, I tried to. She's like, usually introduce myself, like, by a different name, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I'm not saying she came out right and said it and was like, I just, like, completely reinvent myself every time. But she also never really said that she didn't. Like, she was like, yeah, I used to do all of these things, blah, blah, blah. And I feel like her friends just kind of brushed her off, in my opinion. So I feel like it's a little bit on them, too. However, I think calling her a sociopath and all of these things without really talking to her and like figuring out why is just kind of rude. But they are teenagers, so it is what it is. So Mecklin eventually goes to her mom's new beach house for spring break. She overhears her mom giving the twins a bath, and her mom's friend had come over and she hears her speaking and is like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. It's quite a lot, all of these things. And she actually was talking about some huge, like, basketball watch party that she usually hosts. And Mechlin thought she was talking about her. So Mechlin does the sensible thing when somebody overreacts and just leaves. Truthfully, as somebody who does that, I get it, and I don't blame her. She goes to this hotel that her and her mom used to go to for like a weekend beach trip and things like that. So she goes and she sits there, and eventually her parents find her and they talk to her. They talk to her about everything and about how they're sorry that they didn't handle the divorce better. And I really think, first of all, I mean, I love confrontation and I think that there somewhat needed to be more yelling, but that's just a personal opinion. And I know not everybody agrees with that, but sometimes I think people just deserve to hear it. And I know I'm a spiteful person and I know I'm not a very forgiving person, and that's a huge flaw of mine, but that's just kind of how I felt at this point in the book because I feel, and it, the problem is because her dad is also a victim in this, it's very hard for me to sit there and also blame him. But I do blame him too because I think I I think it's incredibly unfair to drag your daughter across all of these states and everything and like assume that she's fine and not try to get her into any sort of therapy or see if she's okay or handle the things that you should be handling as an adult, like the moving, the packing, the making sure that she is registered for school, things like that. Like, grow up, be a father. You have one kid. Jesus, imagine if you had more, but it's also like it's not fair to her. You guys put a lot of responsibility on her when it shouldn't have been on her. And that's it. And they essentially figure out that her dad is going to go to Hawaii, but Mechlin doesn't want to go, so she'll go home and live with her mom, even though that's the last thing she wants to do. And it is a way, and it is it gets resolved at the end of the book. And there's something I will say, I don't understand how these kids transfer schools so much. I feel like that's just not accurate, but I could be 100% wrong because I've never really transferred schools like that. Anyway, there are some theatrics about her leaving. She ends up staying with Opal though until she finishes out the semester, which, I mean, it was like a month left and she's going to college. Like, I don't understand why she wouldn't just finish it out. It ends with her working at the new restaurant because the old restaurant eventually closed down. She's dating Dave, which is really sweet. And I am stunned I never read this book before. I think what happened was I read along for the ride, and then after that, I think is What Happened to Goodbye came out, and then I didn't get What Happened to Goodbye because I was waiting for it, and then I just kind of forgot, and then I just never read any more books from Sarah Dessen until I believe it's called Saint Anything or Once and for All. I don't really remember. Maybe I just skipped the one. Whatever. Anyway, point being, I am gonna go buy a copy of this book because I loved it so much. I thought it was amazing. 10 out of 10, no notes. Highly recommend. Please go read. I want more confrontation always, but I do think that this is such a well written book. And yeah, I loved it so much. But I know I said I was going to do Dreamland this week, you guys. It's really hard for me to do that book. Like, I reread the book and I was just like, whoa, I forgot how intense it truly was. So I really think that, okay, next week I think I'm just going to buckle down and do it, but it is an intense book. So I just want you to be forewarned and prepared that it is a lot. So with that though, I say thank you so much for watching. Please leave a comment, like, subscribe, whatever it might be. Let me know if you have any book recommendations. Let me know if there's a book you specifically want me to review, but other than that, I'll catch you guys next week for another edition of Summer of Sarah. Bye!